So what can we say about the historical Jesus? Well, first and foremost, that there was a historical Jesus. And I know that may sound obvious, but I often think the basics, the foundations, are more important than we give them credit for. We can get used to them and quite easily find ourselves out of touch with the surprise, the challenge and scandal then and now that Christian faith was and is. The fact of the historical Jesus is as important as what he was like. God entered history. Eternity entered time. And from that point, everything changes. Humanity will never be the same again. And it's true that the Gospels tell the story from a faith perspective, from a theological perspective, but the story they tell is a real one. The sources we have for Jesus are at least as good as those we have for other figures of his day. So that invites us to read them attentively and to allow them speak. So what can we know about Jesus of the first century in our time? What did he look like? What does he do? Well, to start with, Jesus was a Jew, born into a particular time and place. The Middle East, Palestine, during the time of the Roman Empire, when Augustus and then Tiberius were emperors. Even being aware of this and knowing Jesus had a specific culture could be helpful for many of our own current cultural interactions and issues. And it can help us comprehend better the meaning of his actions, which otherwise we tend to tame. So let's name some of those facts about Jesus. Well, we know little about his early life up to the point where he was baptized by a preacher called John the Baptist. Now, this seems to have provoked a reaction, as it was for people who considered themselves to be sinners. He announced a kingdom and called it good news, and made it present wherever he passed, provoking healings, miracles, and life changes. He had a tremendous, unusual even authority when he spoke, and he owned that authority. He chose disciples to come with him in contrast to the custom of his time, in which disciples chose their own master. He interacted with, ate, drank, and made friends with people who were on the edge of society. He called God Abba, an expression of immense intimacy, scandalous to his peers. And he named this God as the reason behind everything he said and did. And it was this reasoning and challenge to those around him that led him to gather opposition from the people of his time, including the Jewish religious leaders. And he was handed over to the Roman authorities to be crucified. Jesus accepted, one could even say embraced, that fate. Before he died, he had a significant going away meal, which has marked the Church since then in the celebration of its Eucharist. And after his death, Jesus was witnessed to as risen by his disciples. And that experience was and still is at the origin of the story, history of the disciples and the Church since then. Now, these are facts we can know about the person of Jesus, but is there a core, a central point to express in this? Who was Jesus? Who is Jesus? Well, the name says a lot. Jesus, one through whom God saves. Emmanuel, God with us. Jesus is the face of God's compassionate, merciful love for us. Pope Francis offers mercy as a lens through which to see both God and the Church. And it's a great key word as long as we get to the heart of it. In English, the word mercy can evoke pity or condescension. But in Latin, misericordia brings together two words, miseria and cordis, misery and heart. God's heart in our misery, which transforms, changes, burns, renews. Mercy is not a light concept. Just as Jesus' life was not a nice, light, polite life. It was a challenge from start to finish, a turning around of all the images and expectations of God and how salvation would happen, reaching out to and accepting every individual who would open hands and heart to receive from Him. Jesus' life tells us very simply that God is on our side, that God is compassionate and feels with those who suffer and comes to our aid no matter what the consequences. And for the historical Jesus, as for those in our times who do the same, that meant persecutions and death. But that was not the last word. We said no to that brilliant, mercy-filled, scary, shining life. But God the Father said yes, the resurrection. So that life won. That life is life.